The waiter hesitated as he handed over the bill. Claudio, in an impeccable suit, calmly extended his hand. The owner laughed loudly, pointing at him. "If you can pay, I'll give you the restaurant." Seconds later, everyone fell silent. The lighting was low, almost intimate. Crystal glasses glinted on white linen tablecloths. The ambient sound was measured whispers, restrained laughter, silverware gliding on French porcelain. Bistro Lumiere wasn't a place of passing through. It was a place of belonging, and belonging there cost more than money. Claudio pushed open the glass door. His tailored navy blue suit fell perfectly from his shoulders. Italian leather shoes gleamed in the chandeliers. He entered alone, without reservation, without haste, without fear. Mariana, the hostess, looked up from her screen. Her professional smile froze for half a second. Her eyes scanned his body from top to bottom. It wasn't subtle. It didn't need to be. Here, people like her asked questions. People like him gave answers. "Do you have a reservation?" The voice was dry, almost an accusation. Claudio smiled. "No, but I'm hungry." She hesitated. She looked back, searching for someone. The manager? The owner? An excuse? He waited. Silence is a weapon when you know how to use it. "Let me see if we have a table available." She turned away before she could even finish her sentence. At the surrounding tables, cross glances were exchanged. A middle-aged couple whispered behind the menu. 3 businessmen with loosened ties laughed softly, but loudly enough. Claudio listened. He always listened. Since childhood, listening was survival. Mariana returned reluctantly. "Table for 1, in the back." Of course, always in the background. He continued. He passed between the tables as if crossing a courtroom. He sat down. He opened the menu. He ordered red wine. He ordered a starter. He ordered a main course. He ordered dessert. He ordered like someone who deserved to be there, because he did. Andre, the young waiter, served in silence, his eyes lowered, his hands trembling. He knew it too. He knew what it was like to serve someone who never looked you in the eye. He knew the weight of being invisible. Across the room, Roberto watched, owner of Lumiere, early 50s, neatly cropped gray hair, hands that had never washed a dish. He knew Claudio, not personally, but he knew the type. He knew him from other times, from other versions of that city. When people like Claudio came in through the back door, Roberto approached, not to greet, to mark his territory. "Is the service okay?" The question was accompanied by a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Claudio nodded. Impeccable." Roberto waited. He waited for Claudio to finish the sentence with excessive thanks, with submissive gratitude. He didn't come. When dessert was finished, Roberto returned, this time without a smile. "Ready to wash the dishes?" The table next to me stopped chewing. 3 heads turned. The entire room slowed down. Only the background music continued, indifferently. Claudio looked up slowly. He held Roberto's gaze like someone holding a hot coal. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence cut the laughter in half, and in that instant, without a single word, everyone there understood. That man had not come to ask permission. Claudio smiled. It wasn't an embarrassed smile. It wasn't the smile of someone apologizing for existing. It was the smile of someone carrying generations on their shoulders. Ancestral, firm, dangerous. Roberto expected an explosion. He expected a scream. He expected Claudio to stand up in indignation, to prove he didn't belong there. But Claudio merely adjusted his napkin on his lap, a slow movement, deliberate, like someone preparing for a silent war. The memory came quickly, without asking permission. Claudio was 8 years old. He was coming home from school and found his father kneeling on the floor of a restaurant similar to this one. White tiles, hands swollen from scrubbing, the light blue uniform soaked with sweat, the chef yelling because a pan wasn't shining enough. His father saw Claudio standing at the service door. He didn't look away. He didn't lower his head. He simply said, softly, almost a whisper that pierced the steam of the kitchen, "One day, son." Claudio never forgot. He didn't forget the smell of cheap detergent. He didn't forget the sound of his father's knees cracking against the cold floor. He didn't forget the promise that look held. He took a deep breath. The air in Lumiere now had a different weight. It wasn't about hunger anymore. It was about honor. Roberto was still there, waiting for a reaction, waiting for entertainment. The businessmen at the next table held their glasses in the air, frozen. The white couple looked away from the menu, pretending not to be part of the spectacle. But their silence was participation. It always was. Andre, the waiter, held the tray too tightly. His fingers whitened around the silver rim. He knew this kind of humiliation. He'd been the target. He'd been the laughingstock. Now he was just a witness. Beatrice, the youngest waitress, stopped in the middle of the room. The water jug trembled in her hand. She was black too. She knew exactly what was happening. She recognized the scene like someone who recognizes a recurring nightmare. Donna Helena, sitting alone at the corner table, didn't look away. She was 72 years old. She'd seen versions of that scene in different decades, in different cities, always the same script. She simply nodded. An almost invisible movement. Silent solidarity. Claudio finally spoke. His voice was calm, firm, unhurried. "I've washed too many dishes, but not here." The sentence cut through the air like a blade. Roberto frowned. He couldn't tell if it was a threat or a confession. It didn't matter. He had already lost control of the narrative. Claudio picked up the wine glass. He took a slow sip, savored it. He placed the glass back on the table without making a sound. The gesture was a declaration. He wasn't there to prove anything. He was there because he had a right. And in that tense silence, between Roberto's frozen laughter and Donna Helena's attentive gaze, one truth became clear. Dignity is not asked for. It is imposed. The restaurant became a courtroom. No judge was needed. No gavel was needed. All that was needed was the heavy silence that spread across the tables like a wine stain on a white tablecloth. At the table in the back, Marta and Fernando exchanged glances. He straightened his tie. She feigned interest in the dessert menu. But they had both heard. They had both seen. And now they had to decide. Were they witnesses or accomplices? Marta whispered something. Fernando shook his head seriously. "Exaggerated," she murmured. As if Claudio's pain required approval. As if humiliation had protocol. Across the room, 3 businessmen laughed. It wasn't spontaneous laughter. It was performative laughter. Jorge, the oldest, banged on the table. "This one's dreaming big." The other 2, Marcelo and Tiago, echoed the laughter obediently. They didn't know Claudio. They didn't need to. His skin color alone was enough to know the role he was supposed to play. Beatrice stopped halfway between the kitchen and table 6. The tray trembled. It wasn't from exhaustion. It was from recognition. She'd been looked at like that before. She'd heard jokes wrapped in jokes. She'd swallowed her indignation with a professional smile. Seeing Claudio there was like looking into a mirror, and it hurt. She looked away. Not out of contempt, for survival. To react would cost her her job. To remain silent would cost her soul. She chose her salary. Andre, the youngest waiter, held the water pitcher with unnecessary force. His fingers turned white on the rim of the glass. He wanted to speak. He wanted to say this was wrong. But his voice wouldn't come. Fear is also violence. Fear is also complicity. Donna Helena, sitting alone near the window, didn't look away. She was 72 years old and centuries weary. She'd seen this scene before in other decades, other cities, other restaurants. The scenery changed. The script never did. She raised her glass slowly. She didn't toast. She just raised it. A subtle gesture, but loaded. It was a coded message. "I see you. I know. You're not alone." Claudio caught the movement. He nodded discreetly. Sometimes, solidarity is all it takes to convey a look. Roberto remained standing next to Claudio's table. He expected an audience. He expected bigger laughs. He expected validation. And part of the restaurant delivered. Some laughed. Some looked away. Some pretended not to hear. But Claudio's silence was louder than all the laughter combined. He didn't scream. He didn't stand up. He didn't make a fuss. He just breathed. He just existed. And that, in some incomprehensible way to Roberto, seemed to be the greatest threat. Waiter Andre finally moved. He brought fresh water to Claudio's table without being asked. His hand trembled. His eyes lowered. But he came. A small act of resistance, almost invisible, but resistance nonetheless. Beatriz met Donna Helena's gaze. The older woman nodded. The younger woman took a deep breath. A silent flow. Recognition between those who already know the weight. Marta, at the back table, put down her menu. She looked at her husband. I think you've crossed the line. Fernando didn't respond. He just drank his wine. Comfort is not having to choose sides. Jorge and the businessmen resumed talking business, as if nothing had happened, as if humiliating someone were an acceptable break between dessert and coffee. Claudio looked around. He saw each of them. He mapped every reaction, every laugh, every silence, every glance away. It was all there. The whole of Brazil could fit in that room. And he understood. It wasn't just about Roberto. It was about all of them. About those who laugh. About those who look away. About those who pretend not to see. Because racism is never a solo act. It's always a choral one. And have you ever seen this kind of thing? Comment below. The smell came before the memory. Reheated food. Yesterday's rice, thin beans, an egg fried in leftover oil. Claudio was 9 years old and hungry for the future. The kitchen table was small, covered with a plaid tablecloth, ripped at the edges. He did his homework under the yellow glow of the flickering lamp. His notebook was crumpled. His pencil was chewed at the edges, a hard eraser that smudged more than it erased. Donna Irene, his mother, sewed beside him. A noisy old machine filled the house with metallic noise. She sewed school uniforms for others, 5 rays apiece. She worked until dawn. Her fingers pricked. Her eyes were red. Study, son. She didn't look up from the needle. The world won't give you anything for free. Claudio looked at her. He saw her hair tied in a tight bun. He saw her calloused hands. He saw her spine bent over the blue fabric. And he understood. That wasn't a warning. It was a testament. Years later, he bought his first suit. It wasn't at a fancy store. It was at a downtown thrift store, 15 reais. It smelled of mothballs and hope. The sleeves were too long. The pants were too tight at the waist. But it was his. He wore that suit to 15 interviews, 15 no's. Each rejection was wrapped in a polite excuse. You don't have the profile we're looking for. We'll keep your resume in our database. Good luck on your journey. Profile, database, journey. Pretty words to say. You're no good. At the 16th interview, he arrived sweating. The bus was late. Heavy rain. His suit was soaked. The interviewer looked at him like someone looking at a stain on a white wall. You came like that. Claudio took a deep breath. He thought about giving up. He thought about leaving. He thought about his mother bent over the sewing machine. I came as best I could, sir. But I came prepared. The man frowned. He expected submission. He expected apologies. He didn't expect firmness. Claudio didn't get the job. But something changed that day. He stopped asking permission to exist. He bought used books. He studied on his own. He took free online courses. He learned English from YouTube videos. He memorized technical terms while washing dishes in a diner 24 hours a day. His father's voice always echoed. His father had died when Claudio was 12, a heart attack at 43. His body was tired of serving. His body was tired of lowering its head. But before he died, he held his son's hand. Never lower your head, boy. Lift your chin. Look them in the eye. Always. Claudio kept that phrase like someone who keeps a jewel. Years passed. He got an internship, then a job, then a promotion. Each step up was twice as expensive. Each achievement had to be proven 3 times over. While others rose through referrals, he rose through persistence. He bought his first new suit at 28, a mall store. A saleswoman followed him through the aisles. She didn't offer any help. She just watched. He tried it on. He paid cash. He left with his head held high. Today, at 36, he had a closet full of tailored suits. He had an imported car. He had an apartment in an upscale neighborhood. He had a black card that opened doors, but he also had memories. A memory of his mother sewing until she bled. A memory of his father dying young. A memory of a thrift store suit and 15 no's. And there, sitting at Lumiere, looking at Roberto, Claudio understood. They thought he was still waiting tables, but he already had a key to the building. All that remained was to show it. Roberto took 2 steps back. It wasn't a strategic retreat. It was discomfort disguised as posture. He expected an explosive reaction. He expected Claudio to lose his composure. He expected the usual scenario. A humiliated black man becomes a spectacle, leaves with his head down, becomes a joke to tell later. But Claudio remained seated, calm, dangerously calm. Roberto didn't like it. Losing control hurts those who always gave the orders. He clapped his hands 3 times. The dull sound echoed through the room. Conversation stopped. Cutlery froze in midair. All eyes turned to him. "Attention, everyone!" The voice was loud, performative, and full of false friendliness. "We have a special guest today." Claudio didn't move. He just watched. He mapped every face, every reaction. Roberto pointed at him theatrically. "Let's see if the doctor can handle it." Forced laughter. "The bill is more expensive than the plate." Jorge and the businessman burst into laughter. Marcelo banged the table. Tiago wiped away tears from laughing so hard. "Free entertainment. Humiliation for dessert." Marta looked away. Fernando drank his wine in one go. The couple at table 7 exchanged awkward glances but said nothing. Silent witnesses, accomplices by omission. Roberto approached again. He grabbed the order from the table. He held it with both hands. He pushed it toward Claudio, as if delivering a court order. "Here, champ, don't forget the tip." The paper slid across the white tablecloth. It landed in front of Claudio. He didn't pick it up immediately. He just glanced at it. He read the numbers in his head. 340 reais. A simple dinner. The price inflated by arrogance. Andre, the waiter, was gripping the tray so tightly his knuckles were white. He wanted to scream. He wanted to say this was wrong. But fear is also a gag. Beatrice stopped on the other side of the room. The water jug trembled in her hand. She saw everything. She felt everything. She recognized everything. She had already been reduced like this. She had already been turned into a joke. Donna Helena closed her eyes. Ancestral pain. Generational weariness. How many times had she seen this scene? In how many different places? With how many different Claudios? The violence changed its guise, but never changed its essence. Roberto crossed his arms. A victorious smile plastered across his face. He didn't want the money. It was never about the money. It was about power. About putting Claudio in what, in his mind, was the only place a black man could be, at the bottom. "So?" Roberto tilted his head. "Are you going to pay or are you going to wash it?" The question wasn't a question. It was a trap. Any answer would serve as fuel. Paying would be humiliating. Not paying would confirm the stereotype. Claudio knew. He knew the game. He'd played his entire life. He took a deep breath. He thought of his mother sewing. He thought of his father kneeling. He thought of all those who came before and had no choice. He thought of all those who would come after and deserved a different choice. The inner voice echoed, firm. "They want to see you broken. Don't give them the satisfaction." Claudio took the order slip, folded it in half, set it back on the table. He said nothing. His silence weighed heavily. Roberto frowned. He expected a reaction. He expected anything. The silence was more threatening than any scream. Because there, in that elite restaurant, with its gleaming glasses and cruel jokes, racism didn't wear a white hood. It wore a gray jacket and smiled while stabbing. The sound came from an unexpected place. Metallic, high-pitched, shrill. A child at table 12 had dropped his fork. The mother ducked quickly, embarrassed, whispering an apology to her husband. But the noise had already done its job. It shattered the tension like shattering glass. Everyone blinked. They started breathing again. The spell of collective humiliation was broken for a second. Claudio took advantage. He lifted the order form with studied calm. He unfolded the paper. He read it line by line. Appetizer, main course, dessert, wine, 340 Rs. Then he pulled out his wallet. Slow motion, deliberate, cinematic. The wallet was genuine leather. Dark brown, worn at the edges, not from poverty, but from constant use. He opened it, and from inside, he removed a card. Black card. The light from the chandelier reflected off the metal surface. A cold, almost defiant glow. The name engraved in relief. Claudio Mendez dos Santos. Jorge stopped laughing. Marcelo swallowed hard. Tiago looked away to his own empty plate. Mariana, the hostess, widened her eyes. She was close enough to see. Close enough to understand she'd misjudged from the start. Roberto frowned. Confusion settled over that face accustomed to controlling everything. The card wasn't part of the script. Black men didn't have cards like that. At least not in his world. Andre, the waiter, let out a barely audible sigh. Relief. Maybe Claudio would be able to leave with dignity. Maybe. Beatriz smiled discreetly. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of someone recognizing a small victory in a long war. Donna Helena nodded. She knew what was coming. She knew the twist. She had been waiting for it her whole life. But then Claudio did something no one expected. Stopped. He held the card in the air. He didn't hand it to Roberto. He didn't put it on the table. He just held it, like someone holding a trump card in a card game. The silence returned. But this time it was different. It wasn't a silence of humiliation. It was a silence of expectation. Claudio looked up. He looked directly at Roberto. Without anger, without fear, just the firmness that comes from someone who carries generations on their shoulders. Before you pay, the voice came out calmly. I want to ask, is this your best offer? The sentence cut the air like a razor. Roberto blinked. What? You said if I paid, you'd give me the restaurant. Claudio tilted his head. I'm asking, are you serious or were you just joking? The tables had turned. The one who had humiliated them was now in the dock. Marta choked on her wine. Fernando dropped his napkin. The couple at table 7 exchanged perplexed glances. Jorge, Marcelo, and Tiago stood motionless, like statues of salt. Andre covered his mouth. He tried to hide the smile that was forming on his lips. Beatriz had to lean against the counter. Her legs were shaking. Her heart was racing. She'd never seen anyone do that. Turn the tables like that. Without shouting, without violence, just with blunt truth. Donna Helena closed her eyes and thanked her ancestors. That moment was an answered prayer. Roberto opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. He searched for words. He found none. Claudio continued holding the card, waiting. He was in no rush. Time was now his ally. The child at table 12 asked loudly, Mom, why did everyone stop talking? The mother told him to be quiet, but the question echoed, why had everyone stopped? Because in that instant, between the glow of the black card and Roberto's awkward silence, everyone understood. The script had changed, and the one writing now was Claudio. Sometimes a revolution doesn't need a shout. It just needs a firm man asking a simple question. Roberto laughed. But it wasn't the laugh of amusement. It was the laugh of someone who feels the ground disappearing beneath their feet and tries to hide it with noise. Who do you think you are? The voice came out too loud. Compensation. When real power escapes, there's excess volume. Claudio put the card in his wallet. He closed it slowly. The sound of the leather flexing echoed in the tense silence. He put the wallet back in his inside jacket pocket. He adjusted his tie. He took a deep breath. Then he stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, every muscle controlled. He wasn't in a hurry. Hurry is for those who are afraid. And Claudio was no longer afraid of men like Roberto. Standing, he had a few inches on him. It wasn't about height. It was about presence. The suit fit perfectly on his broad shoulders. His posture was erect. His gaze was steady. He occupied the space like someone who had always belonged there. Roberto took half a step back. Instinct. I'm the investor who just bought this building. Absolute silence. It wasn't the dramatic silence of a movie. It was the silence of collective shock, of oxygen draining from the room. of certainties crumbling. Jorge dropped his napkin. Marcelo choked on his water. Tiago looked at the other two, seeking confirmation that he'd misheard. Mariana, the hostess, paled. Her hands trembled as she held the reservation tablet. She remembered the look she'd given him when Claudio walked in. She remembered his curt question, "Do you have a reservation?" As if he didn't deserve to be there. Andre dropped the tray on the counter. He almost fell. He couldn't believe it. But at the same time, he could. He'd always known there was something different about that man. Beatrice covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were watering, not from sadness, from vicarious pride. From seeing someone like her turn the impossible around. Donna Helena smiled. Finally, she smiled broadly, without hiding it. It was her victory, too. A victory for all the time she'd been underestimated and had no trick up her sleeve to prove otherwise. Fernando, Marta's husband, let out a low, "Fuck." Marta nudged him, but her mouth also dropped open. The child at table 12 asked, "Dad, what's an investor?" His father told him to shut up. This wasn't the time for explanations. It was the time to testify. Claudio continued. His voice was calm, firm, each word chosen with surgical precision. "Starting tomorrow, this restaurant will be reevaluated." Deliberate pause, including your posture. Roberto tried to speak. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in 20 years running this place, he had no answer. Claudio looked around. His eyes swept the room. Every table, every face, every person who had laughed, looked away, or pretended not to see. "You think I don't belong here?" It wasn't a question. It was an observation. "You think my place is in the kitchen, or outside, or invisible?" No one answered. Guilt is loud even when silent. "But I didn't come to prove anything to you." He looked directly at Roberto. "I came to dinner because I can, because I deserve it, because I paid." Then he took out his wallet again. He took out his black card. He handed it to Roberto. "Now swipe your card and bring me the receipt." Roberto took the card with a trembling hand. He turned to go to the cashier. He walked like an automaton, like someone who had just lost not just the argument, but the entire narrative. Andre stepped forward. "Mr. Claudio, I'll take it." Claudio nodded. "Thank you, Andre." The waiter smiled. For the first time that night, he really smiled. The restaurant was still silent, but now it was a silence of shame, of collective embarrassment, of mirrors being held up to faces that preferred not to see themselves. Because when the mask falls, all that remains is the naked truth. Respect should never be conditional on a bank account. If you were in that situation, what would you have done? Answer here. Your opinion strengthens the debate. Andre returned with the receipt. He walked differently now. His steps were firm, his head held high, as if Claudio's dignity had infected even those who were merely observing. He held out the paper and card. "Everything's fine, Mr. Claudio." The full name, it wasn't Sir, thrown in as an automatic courtesy. It was a genuine acknowledgement. Claudio took the receipt, he checked it, he signed it, he returned the pen. "Thank you, Andre." The waiter nodded. He wanted to say something more. He couldn't find the words. He just smiled and walked away. Mariana approached, the hostess who had sized up Claudio with her eyes when he entered. Now her eyes were lowered, her hands clasped in front of her, the posture of someone asking for forgiveness without knowing how. "Sir, I'm sorry." His voice was thin. "We didn't know who you were." Claudio stared at her. The silence was heavy. He let the sentence hang in the air for a few seconds too long. Then he replied calmly, "What if I wasn't an investor? What if I was just a guy wanting to have dinner?" Mariana had no answer. She lowered her eyes even further. The question was a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. Across the room, Donna Helena stood up. She grabbed her purse. She walked to Claudio's table. She stopped beside him. She said nothing. She simply placed her hand on his shoulder. A brief, firm gesture, a generational passing of the baton. She looked at Roberto, at Mariana, at the businessmen. Then she said, her voice heavy with decades of experience. "I know who he is. I've always known." She turned and left, the glass door closing behind her, but her presence continued to echo. Beatriz approached Claudio's table. She held a jug of water no one had asked for, an excuse. She needed to be close. She needed to witness it up close. "Mr. Claudio," she whispered. "Thank you." He frowned. "And why?" "For not lowering your head." Her eyes were moist. It wasn't about him, it was about her. About all the times she'd ducked. All the times she hadn't had a black card to show. All the times she'd swallowed humiliation because she needed the job. Claudio nodded. He understood. "You don't have to bend down either." Beatrice smiled. Tears fell. She quickly wiped them away and returned to work. But something in her had changed. A small seed planted. Jorge, Marcelo, and Tiago paid the bill hurriedly. They got up without finishing their coffee. They left without looking back. There was no fun anymore. There was no joke, just embarrassment that lingers. Marta looked at Fernando. "We should have said something." Fernando didn't answer. He just drank the rest of his wine. His silence was a confession. The couple at table 7 asked for the check. They wanted to leave. They couldn't bear the burden of being passive spectators any longer. Roberto remained standing near the cashier, motionless, like a pillar of salt. He looked at his own restaurant as if seeing it for the first time, or the last. Claudio put the receipt in his wallet. He straightened his jacket. He looked around one last time. Every table, every face, every person who had learned something that night, even if they hadn't meant to. He walked toward the door. His steps were calm. No rush, no anger, just dignity that didn't need to be shouted to be heard. Before leaving, he stopped. He turned to Roberto. "The restaurant is still yours. But respect," he paused. "Respect is the least you can expect from someone who serves the public." He pushed open the door. The cold night air hit his face. He took a deep breath. Freedom has a scent. Behind him, the lumiere remained lit. But the light seemed different now. Less exclusive, less untouchable. Because dignity isn't the property of those who have money. It's the right of those who breathe. Share this story with anyone who needs a reminder. Respect is priceless. The sidewalk was empty. A yellow streetlight illuminated the wet asphalt. It had rained earlier. The smell of damp earth mixed with car exhaust. The city was breathing after the storm. Claudio stopped beneath the light. He took his cell phone out of his pocket. The screen lit up. 3 unread messages. 2 from work. 1 from Leah. He opened his daughter's first. He always did. It was a video. 10 seconds. Leah was 10 years old. Colorful braids. A wide smile that took up her entire face. "Dad, I saw you in the paper today. You bought a whole building." She jumped in front of the camera. "When I grow up, I'm going to be just like you." Claudio smiled. It wasn't a restrained smile. It was a smile that was so beautiful it hurt. His eyes welled up. He didn't try to hide it. He leaned against the wall. He closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. The air went in cold. It came out warm. He thought of his mother. Donna Irene had died 3 years ago. She hadn't seen her son buy his first property. She hadn't seen her granddaughter grow up. She hadn't seen any of that. But somehow, Claudio knew she saw it. She felt it. She was there. He thought of his father, dead at 43, knees worn from so much kneeling, hands calloused from so much scrubbing. He never saw his son in a suit. He never saw his son respected. But he left a legacy that money can't buy, an erect spine and a steady gaze. Claudio opened his eyes. He reached into his pocket. He looked for something. He found it. An old keychain. Rusty metal. It had belonged to his father. It was a keychain from a restaurant where he worked for 15 years. It quickly faded. The chain was broken, and Claudio repaired it with wire. He held the keychain in the palm of his hand. He felt its weight. It wasn't physical weight. It was symbolic weight. Entire generations could fit inside that piece of metal. He put it back in his pocket. He clutched the phone to his chest. Leah in the video was still smiling, frozen on the screen. "When I grow up, I'm going to be just like you." The phrase echoed. But Claudio thought differently. Leah didn't need to be like him. Leah needed to be better. She needed to enter restaurants without fear, without needing to prove anything, without carrying a card as a shield. She just needed to exist and be respected for it. A couple passed by on the sidewalk, a white man and a white woman. They looked at Claudio. He looked back, without looking away, without ducking. They swerved first. Claudio started walking again. His footsteps were calm on the wet sidewalk, the sound of his Italian shoes on the concrete, a steady rhythm. Each step was a declaration. Each step was ancestry in motion. He thought of Roberto, of Mariana, of Jorge, Marcelo, and Tiago, of everyone who laughed, of everyone who looked away, of everyone who pretended not to see. He didn't feel anger. He felt tired. Tired of having to prove himself. Tired of carrying competence as a defense. Tired of being an admired exception instead of a normalized presence. But he also felt something stronger. Responsibility. Because he wasn't alone on that walk. He was carrying his mother. He was carrying his father. He was carrying Donna Helena. He was carrying Beatrice. He was carrying Andre. He was carrying Leah. It carried all who came before and had no choice. It carried all who would come after and deserved a different choice. He stopped at the corner. The traffic light was red. He waited. He looked up. The sky was clear after the rain. Timid stars were beginning to appear. He thought of the phrase his father always said, "Lift your chin, boy." He got up, and there, alone on the empty corner, under the streetlight and the promise of stars, Claudio understood. They laughed at him today. They tried to reduce him. They tried to erase him. But he remained standing, and he would continue. Because sometimes, resistance is just that. Continuing to walk with dignity when the whole world would rather see you running. Subscribe and share. Stories like this build tomorrow.